All right, great. So welcome everyone to our EHV webinar series, part 2B. And so first, we're going to go and introduce ourselves. My name is Katie Kopp. I use she, her pronouns. I am a case manager with Sanctuary for Families.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bushra Hussain. I'm a program director over at Sanctuary for Families, and I will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Joy Liu, pronouns she, her. I'm a clinical social worker, like a therapist, in the domestic violence aftercare program at University Settlement.
Great. So just a few guidelines for kind of how this is going to work. As I mentioned, this is being recorded and we can't see any of your beautiful faces. So if you want to engage with the presentation, which is highly encouraged, please put any questions, comments in the chat at any time that you would like. As we said, Bushra will be monitoring the chat, and then Joy and I will be popping in and out of there as well. Questions are encouraged throughout this. We really want this to be for all of you. And we also know that you are going to have a lot of specific questions probably about, your particular scenarios, your voucher, your housing situation. And if that's something that you want to talk about at this time, you can put your questions in the chat and ask. We also know that that might not be something that's comfortable. So we're sharing all of our contact information and you can reach out to us after the fact if you want to set up a time to talk more about emergency housing vouchers and figuring this out. But this is all recorded, so feel free to step away if you need. We'll be covering a lot of material, so it might get a little bit overwhelming at times. Just know that you can, take time and care for yourself. Joy, anything to add?
Yeah, so related to that, we thought it would be helpful if we started with kind of a mindfulness or grounding exercise. And, you're not on camera, like Katie said, so you're welcome to just listen to your body and do what it needs to do right now. So no worries if you completely ignore me, but for those of you that are interested, I'm calling this Inhaling the Universe. And yeah, welcome, follow me. So I'm gonna back up and I suggest you do that as well, or you could even stand up if you feel like it. I don't know if those of you have been sitting all day or, I don't know, kind of tired, but go ahead and just give yourself some space. I'll back up so you can see what I'm doing. So sit with your spine straight and your body relaxed, your feet hip width apart. Gently raise your toes up, right? I'm looking down to see if I could see my toes. Go ahead and do that again. So lower and raise. And this time raise up your heels. So raise up your heels. So like you're going up on your toes and then lower them again. All right, awesome. So just feel the bottom of your feet on the floor. Now gently raise your arms as high as you can. You can do a little stretch if you need to. Fingers spread and then breathe in as you're doing this. And then hold your breath and then gently lower your arms by your side. All right, let's do it one more time. So breathe in, reach up. And then this time go as you lower your arms. Awesome. I see you, Katie. Good job. All right, one more time. You're going to raise your arms up and breathe in. And this time imagine scooping the entire universe into your arms and over your head as you raise your arms again. Hold your breath. And then this time lower your whole body as you exhale. I don't know if you heard me. So let's do it one more time. So breathe in, raise your arms again. Now imagine scooping the universe up and over your head, right? And then imagine showering yourself with the stars, with the planets and the space, and then lower gently as you exhale. All right, one more time. Imagine scooping the universe up and over your head. Scoop, 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 shower the stars, shower the planets, and then exhale. Amazing. So let's end this exercise just by gently closing your eyes and taking 3 soft, slow, mindful breaths. and remember that you are an important part of the universe. So breathe in, exhale. Thank you, everyone. I hope you guys feel a little relaxed and grounded. I'm going to pass it off to Katie.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joy. So now, as a little bit of an overview of the whole EHV webinar series, we started this all the way back in November with part 1, and that was about understanding your EHV, your emergency housing voucher. This gave background on the whole EHV program, what is it, when did it start, what are the different parts of the emergency housing voucher, what does that look like, what are your rights and responsibilities as an EHV holder, and what does the process of recertification look like, annual recertification and interim recertification. We still have the recording of that webinar that will be shared with everyone, and we also have some handouts from that that we would love to share with all of you. And then the second part of our EHV webinar series that you can see here is part 2, transfers, moves, and more. So it's focused on what is the moving process like? And it is so complex that we broke it up into 2 more webinars. So we had part 2A last week, which is how to start the EHV transfer and apartment search. And then tonight is the final installment of the series, part 2B, EHV transfer paperwork and move-in process. If you feel like you've missed any, part 1, part 2A, anything like this, don't worry, we'll have the webinars recorded and everything like that will be shared afterwards. But this is where we'll be starting with today. Yes, I see in the chat, someone would love part 1. Absolutely. After all of these webinars are done and uploaded to YouTube, so I think this one should be up, probably early next week. I will be sending out an email to everyone who registered for any and all of the webinars, and that will include links to the YouTube videos of all of the webinars. It'll include handouts, our contact information, everything like that. So moving on today, 2B. And we're continuing with the case study that we started last week. So we know that a lot of this material that we're going to be talking about is very general and vague. And so we want to make sure that we're grounded in, what would this actually look like in a real client, a real person? Because a lot of you here are voucher holders and you have real life experiences. And so everyone's experiences of this voucher are different, but we want to make sure that we're grounded in what might be, a real person's experience with this. So we're going to walk through the example case of Amy, who needed to move because she had a domestic violence incident at her apartment and her home address was compromised. So last week, we started going through this whole EHV transfer process. And so Amy was requesting a transfer, received her moving voucher and her PIN letter, did the apartment search, found a great apartment, applied, was accepted by the landlord. Then there's the landlord doing the rental package, reviewing that. Then there's the inspection, passes the inspection. There's a conditional move-in letter, HAP contract, applying for HRA moving assistance, using that HAP contract, executing that and the lease. Then there is, getting everything finally approved. Then there's move-in. This is a lot. I know this is an overwhelming slide, even just for me. And so we're going to break it down step by step. But last week we went to this part. Amy requested a transfer. She got her move voucher. She got her PIN letter, did the apartment search, found a great apartment. That's where we're leaving off. And today we are talking about the whole rest of this. So Amy found a great apartment that is within her budget and she was accepted by the landlord. So now the landlord package is the next step. So landlord package, rental packet, it's all the same thing. And that's what we're talking about now. It's a little bit different for NYCHA versus for HPD. So as we talked about last week, there are two public housing agencies in New York City that administer emergency housing vouchers: NYCHA, which is New York City Housing Authority, and HPD, which is New York City Department of Housing and Preservation and Development. And so the processes for moving and most things differ a little bit between which agency is like administering your voucher. So if it's NYCHA, then for her rental packet, Amy has a document with a PIN letter. And then the landlord is going to use that PIN letter to go online, enter that PIN, and then fill out all the information, upload all the supporting documentation about this proposed rental unit. And then Amy's going to approve that in her self-service portal. If it's for HPD though, Amy's rental packet, it is actually a physical packet of documents. It is thick and it is a lot of papers. And so the landlord and Amy will fill that out together, and then we'll get that submitted to HPD. And that's how that is submitted if it's an HPD administered voucher. So looking at the NYCHA rental package. So Amy gives a copy of her PIN letter to the landlord. Amy, when she was given her move voucher by NYCHA, after she requested her transfer is approved, she was given a move letter, a move voucher, and a PIN letter. So she gives her a copy of her PIN letter to the landlord. Then the landlord is going to use this PIN in order to enter the information about the proposed apartment rental into the NYCHA portal. Next, Amy is going to go into her NYCHA self-service portal, and then she can see the information that the landlord entered. What is this saying? Like, what is the apartment? What is the proposed rent? What are the proposed utilities? What does this all look like? Amy can look over all of that and approve it. And once Amy approves it, then NYCHA is going to have all of this information and they're going to review it all. So what this actually looks like this is what a NYCHA PIN letter looks like. This is a real one taken from a client with all the sensitive information, redacted out. But you can see that with this PIN letter, it has just like the client's information, and then it's like a code of letters and numbers. This is what the PIN letter is. The landlord uses that to enter all the information online. Next, from Amy's perspective, after the landlord has entered her information, she is going to go into her self-service portal. This is what the self-service portal looks like. She's going to click on, in her Section 8 account, manage your account. Next, there's a button that is rental/transfer voucher. Just going to click on that. And then here, there's a spot here where like all of the lease up requests would be here in your portal. And it looks a little bit different because this person whose portal it is at a slightly different stage in the lease up process. But you'd be able to see here, right under the start finish, there would be a little button that says click here to approve rental documents. You would click on that, and then it'd be able to see like this is the proposed utilities, this is the proposed rent, this is what the landlord entered. And then you look over all of that, you sign your name, you're like, sounds good to me. And then NYCHA reviews everything. If it's for HPD, as we said, the rental package is a bunch of documents. And the landlord has to fill out all of those documents, as well as attach a few more documents of their own, and then hand them all in to HPD. So this is a list of all the documents that need to be submitted to HPD by the landlord. You as the voucher holder, or Amy as the voucher holder, doesn't really have to be worried about every single one of these. She'll have most of them as her rental package, and she's going to give it to the landlord. The landlord's going to fill out all the parts. Landlord's going to get all the documentation, and Amy will have to do a few signatures. She can review all of that, and then the landlord is going to submit it. Because this is so complex, there are some great instructions that are online about filling out this landlord package. So this is a YouTube video from HPD. And this walks you through all of the steps of the landlord package. So we'll
Tenant Resources Owner Services Unit at the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development.
So we're not going to watch the whole thing. It's 12.5 minutes and it's a little bit dry. But when you fill it out, when you're working on the landlord packet and when your prospective landlord is working on the landlord packet, this is a great resource. This is just accessible to anyone. And this can help you fill out all of the paperwork that is necessary. Just because it's a lot of jargon. But getting all this in and getting it all right the first time will really help you out in the process. I do see a question in the chat of, do you have an example of an HPD voucher? And that is a great question. So all emergency housing vouchers look basically the same. And I don't have an example in this presentation, unfortunately, because we're kind of like past that part in the process, but they look basically the same, but there's one spot where it says like the agency administering your voucher, and that is where it'll say either NYCHA or HPD. The HPD does not have a PIN letter like the NYCHA form that I showed you. But when you review the slides from, parts A and parts 1 and 2A, there will be examples of the vouchers and the breakdown of all the different parts of it. But that is a great question. Okay, so we're not going to watch this video, but anytime you want to, it is here for you.
Welcome to the Division of Tenant Resources Owner Services Unit.
So next step, after the rental package is done, completed, reviewed, now it's going to NYCHA or HPD. They are going to look at the rental package and they're going to determine, like, can the owner rent this property? Is the rent reasonable? Is this a reasonable thing for you to be renting with your voucher? Will this like fit with your voucher? They don't want you to be renting an apartment that is like, it wouldn't be covered by your voucher. It's too expensive, it doesn't fit, something like that. Or they're just like the rent is totally kind of unreasonable. And so NYCHA and HPD are going to review all of this. And this depends time-wise. It's a little bit of a pain. You don't really know when it's going to happen. I can't say exactly, it's probably not going to happen within a week. It's hopefully happens within a month of as they're doing this, but they kind of take their sweet time with reviewing the rental package. Once they do, they're like, okay, great, rent is reasonable, we're ready to move forward. NYCHA or HPD will reach out to the landlord to schedule a housing quality standards inspection, HQS.
Okay, sorry, I was looking for my unmute. So as Katie was saying, the HQS, it stands for Housing Quality Standard Inspection, and it's actually developed by HUD, right? So it's a federal requirement and then administered here in New York City by HPD and NYCHA. So they're required to inspect all subsidized apartments to ensure compliance. And these standards are basically like, hey, is this space habitable, right? Ultimately, is this unit a safe place to live, right? So Amy's apartment, let's go back to this example, right? Must meet the HQS requirements before contracting, before moving in, and throughout her stay. And so these inspections you'll find, I think some of you guys have recertified, and some of you may have even had a inspection in the second year or first year of living there, right? I would say they're kind of random. So just keep in mind that even though you're seeing this right now, during this transfer webinar, right? But keep in mind that in your 10 years of holding this voucher, you may also have more inspections. And this is again for safety, but ultimately accountability, right? So that the landlord, the owner, can continue receiving monthly housing assistance payments from the voucher and from you and your portion, right? All right, so next slide, we'll go over like the checklist. So many of you are like, all right, what are they inspecting? And it's actually all online. And Katie or Bushra, if you have the chance, you could drop it in the chat. Again, administered by HUD. So you can go to HUD, which is more of like a technical checklist, or you can look on NYCHA or the HPD website. They also have great resources. And so you can take this checklist with you as well, like when you're doing a walkthrough with the broker. Many times clients would even print it out to like share with a landlord if it's their first time. If it's your chat is like, okay, so let's start with rooms. All right. So at minimum, the unit must have a living room, kitchen, bathroom, and one living sleeping room for every 2 family members. Bedrooms must be at least 80 square feet. The living room can be used as a sleeping room, FYI. Ceilings, right? Walls and windows and floors must be in good condition, free of cracks, holes, etc. Electrical outlets and light fixtures. Each bedroom must have either 2 electrical outlets or 1 outlet and 1 permanent light fixture. In the kitchen, any outlet installed within 6 feet of a water source must be this is like super technical, but basically saying that the outlet must be further away, how do you say it, from a water source so that there can't be any kind of electrical issues. And then bathrooms require a permanent light fixture, but no outlet. The kitchen requires a permanent outlet, but no light fixture. And then, of course, smoke detectors, right? And oftentimes the carbon monoxide detectors are together with smoke detectors. And the batteries have to be operating, hardwired, or even a backup battery on each level of the unit. And they have to be installed in a ceiling, right? Or on a wall 4 to 12 inches from the ceiling. And then if the tenant is hearing impaired or hard of hearing, the alarm must be designed for hearing impaired people. Same thing with the carbon monoxide detectors, if they're not together with the smoke detectors. And then they can't be installed in a bathroom or a kitchen. So, and they have to be within 5 feet of gas cooking appliances. So let's briefly go over like windows. So windows are important because they actually also determine whether or not the inspection, or I should say, yeah, is life-threatening, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. So windows have to have guards, especially if the tenant has children that is ages 10 or under. Also, the windows have to have, or they cannot have locks on them, in a sense that the guard cannot be open in case there's a fire, right? So it cannot be locked with like a key, or it just has to be like a latch. Also stoppers, so stoppers meaning that the windows can't open at a certain height, like they can't fully open if there's no guards. And of course, having heat and hot water, right? And then I think that's it. But again, the checklist that Bushra sent is definitely way more thorough, but I kind of went over it, right? All right, next slide. Okay, so this is life-threatening hazard, and this is when you fail the inspection, right? Sorry, not you. This is when the unit fails the inspection. It's if the building is in imminent danger of collapse, those illegal window gates that I said, right? And they actually also take the smoke and carbon monoxide detectors really seriously. So if they're missing or they're not operating, that's considered a life-threatening hazard. And then buildings before 1978, it's important that the paint surfaces, right, because of lead, can't be deteriorating. And any kind of wiring, right, makes sense that is exposed, so that sparking or that just might catch on fire. And then any kind of severe fire damage that wasn't repaired. And if the unit has no second means of egress, so meaning there's no second exit, right, then that would be considered a life-threatening hazard. And these are actually are 24-hour violations, so that if Amy was already living in the building, then the landlord, the owner would have to fix it like within 24 hours, or that they would have to vacate, or that the landlord would lose the subsidy and lose the tenancy, right? And I think, yeah, next slide. And then I can talk a little bit more about what the NLT means. So NLT in short is non-life threatening. So basically violations, things that need to be repaired and fixed that are not the list that I showed before of the threatening, right? And the thing about NLTs is that if you did not pass, right? Like you passed in a sense where they're, again, not you, but the unit passed in a sense where there's no life-threatening violations, right? Then you have the option of basically moving out, or sorry, not moving out, not accepting the apartment, or accepting them based on the condition that the landlord, the owner, will repair them within 30 days. So this is kind of important to understand. So basically an NLT condition is defined as any condition that would fail to meet HUD's housing quality standards, right? And is not a life-threatening condition, that list that I showed before, right, as defined by HUD. So most commonly are ones that are just like broken. I wouldn't say missing, because I think that they still consider that life-threatening. And then electrical outlet covers, right? So I had a client similar who the electric outlet was close to the water, but it just needed a covering. And so again, that's an NLT. And then defective windows that would require just repair. And okay, next slide. So let's say inspection happened, right? Amy, and okay, so there was no life-threatening violations. However, there were a few of those. Yeah, there's a few of repairs that need to be made. So NLTs. So Amy has 3 options. Amy can look for another apartment, like I said, and then this is actually the form. This is exactly what it looks like, right? Amy can choose those 3 below. Do you see that under G? It says, please check one of the options below. Wait until repairs are made and a reinspection. So that means Amy would not move in and say, okay, I'm gonna wait until, so meaning the kind of the contract phase is like paused, right? I'm gonna wait until landlord fixes everything. And Amy would do that, I think, because oftentimes landlords, they do want to get paid, right? They do want to move in that process. And so this will kind of encourage the landlord to repair things in a more efficient way, okay? As opposed to the third, which is that box that's checked, you know, where Amy's like, I accept the unit with the conditions, right? With having a few of these NLTs, but will allow access for the landlord to make these repairs within the 30 days, right? However, you have to schedule Amy or the landlord, and it's suggested that Amy makes that. That's why I had the numbers in the beginning, is to make that call for the reinspection, because anything beyond 30 days, right? And then it slows everything down again, and then it's not, there's a chance again that the landlord could stop HAP payments, or meaning the landlord won't receive the payments. So that's kind of the drawback, I guess, is that if you move in with NLT violations, sometimes landlords like, okay, I'm already receiving my portion, right? I'm already receiving money from the government, and then they might be a little slower to pay it. I don't know if that makes sense. And then again, questions in the chat too that we can totally answer. So next slide. And then, oh yeah.
Joy, before you move on, there is a question in the chat
Yeah.
about something you just mentioned.
Okay, so what happens if your apartment is deemed inspected and clear? You move in and there's clearly repair issues, open walls, near pipes, obvious cracks. Yeah, Are we eligible? Okay, so let me answer the first part of the question. No, I think that's a great question. I think that's why we're doing this webinar, and that's why the checklist is like there for you as well, so that you can do a walkthrough. And even after the inspection, you can say to your broker, like, hey, can I do another walkthrough before I check that box, before we move on into the next step of the contracting, right? So if you do move in and there are a lot of issues like water damage, bubbling of paint, these examples here, you can call these two numbers for a re-inspection, right? I do suggest talking to the landlord and to the owner, I mean, landlord owner first, right? And just to like talk to them and say, hey, I'm so grateful that I'm here, but like, you passed the inspection, but there are these issues that aren't covered. And then if your relationship with your landlord isn't in that way, in terms of you're being completely, unheard and neglected, and then I would call the number for a re-inspection, and that could happen at any time in your tenancy. And do you want to add anything, Katie, that would be helpful?
Yeah, I was gonna say just that, as a Section 8 tenant, you are entitled to HQS inspections, requesting it at any point. And so if you feel like, even if it's been technically deemed inspected and cleared, if you feel like it's not, the place is not up to HQS standards, then you have that right to request a re-inspection. And if they find anything, then you'll have the same things where the landlord will have to fix it. And also trying to talk to the landlord, get those things figured out before inspections and stuff is always like a good first line of defense when dealing with things in your apartment that are not going right. This is also something we talked about in part A of the webinar series. And just to answer the last part of your question in the chat first, are we eligible for new appliances if they're not in good condition but working? Oftentimes, like, you'll have to check specifics of the HQS and of your lease. Like, a lot of times landlords will be able to get away with, if the appliance works. It doesn't need to be in like amazing condition, but it needs to be in working condition. It's only usually if it's like a safety hazard that they're able to, like, get a new one. But if it is, you feel like it's hazardous, it's posing a risk, then you might be entitled to a new one. And Sparkle, I totally understand. Yes, I'm gonna allow you to talk now.
Yes, hi. I'm having a problem with my current landlord. First they told me inspection passed, and then when they came and did another inspection, it failed. It's just a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of these landlords are getting away with it because Section 8 came, 311 came. The only thing they did was close out the ticket.
That is,
Nothing was fixed.
yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. That's a tough situation because those are the avenues that we generally suggest. Now, the
And
inspection,
I called both of these numbers and nothing's being done. So it's like, well, what is the purpose?
at that point, and I would suggest potentially trying to talk to a housing attorney. So there are different like free legal organizations around the city that, if like, the nice thing is about having these HQS and your 311 complaints is like, this is proof. These are showing that you've been trying to work on this issue. That might be something that you're able to talk with a housing attorney about and see, because it is something that they are legally required to keep their apartment up to HQS standards. So if that is something that is continually ongoing, even after inspections and after 311 complaints, and you're still not getting any more support, then trying to talk to an advocate and or a lawyer about this would probably be what I would suggest as the next steps.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And if you want to, reach out to us via email at the end of this and see if we can get some referrals for housing attorneys, happy to help with that.
Yes, I will do that. Thank you.
And in the chat, there's someone else with a different situation about this. Would you like to speak to this? Yeah, I can allow you to speak, and then your talking is permitted.
Tawana? It's okay. You can also type if you feel more comfortable too, Tawana, or did you want to unmute?
Yeah, so totally up to you. You also can take our emails and send us stuff afterwards, after the webinar, if you want to ask your questions to a more, you know, slightly less public audience, and we can share resources like that. So for everyone here, you know, if you have questions and you want to ask them out loud or in the chat, absolutely go for it. If you don't want to, that's also totally up to you. That is an option. We are not going away after this. So
Yeah.
let's-
Yeah, so I think like in this step of the transfer process, I think it's important because oftentimes there is this rush to get to the HAP, to the contracting. So based on the examples like that Sparkle and Tawana shared, you know, like it's important to maybe wait until repairs are made before moving on to the next step, you know, like, or maybe doing more walkthroughs, right? And it is exciting, right, when you found that apartment, yet having a broker there, right, to kind of, or even a caseworker or friends to kind of talk through some of the issues that may be overlooked because of this sense of kind of urgency to get that contract through, if that makes sense. So again, like that slide prior, you don't have to move in right away. Like I think HPD and NYCHA after that inspection give you that option, and then owners has 30 days from the date of inspection to complete the repairs, right? If it's an NLT, but you don't have to take it. So I think that's something to keep in mind. Okay, next slide.
Absolutely. There's also one other question in the chat that I want to very quickly answer. And that is from Marianne. Are HPD packets available for the landlord to complete and submit online? The HPD packet is a physical packet that's given to the voucher holder. So parts of it can be found online, but you can't find a whole like landlord packet online. So that is something that you're given during the voucher search. And so that if you lose it and you need another copy, you can go to HPD and get a new copy. But that is, you can't really find it online. Okay.
And then for Sparkle, I'm sorry to hear that. The part 2A, like the first part of this presentation, Katie did share that after 10 months of your Section 8 move-in date, you can do a voluntary transfer if you need to, and also, you know, emergency transfer. That's why we're here if you are looking for another apartment or if you want to move. All right, so the responsibilities of the tenant, of Amy, after move-in, right? And that's something to keep in mind. Like I said, those inspections could continue, is that Amy's responsible for the smoke, maintaining, right, the smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, like making sure the batteries are working and changing them out, also maintaining electricity and gas payments if that's part of your lease, and then also not installing any double cylinder lock. So that's like where it locks on both sides, right? And you need a key on both sides for both doors, but also the window guards that I showed you earlier. And then also making sure that the exit doors and the fire escapes and the windows are clear during inspection. And this is something that, you know, like if you have plants and a cat, like I showed in this picture, you can move them out of the way during inspection. And then just making sure that there's not too much kitchen grease that would be potentially a fire hazard. I think that's it. And I'll try to help out in the chat. So that's it for the NLTs, and if not passing, but if Amy's unit passes, right, the inspection, Katie is gonna move us forward into the HAP process.
So here we are, the unit passed inspection, and we are ready to move on. So after this happens, it usually takes at least a few days to process. And then the next step is that NYCHA and HPD will be issuing a conditional move-in letter to Amy. And then they're going to also send a HAP contract. HAP is housing assistance payment. They're going to send that contract to the landlord. So there are two parts of this, and we're going to go through the two parts of this, starting with the conditional move-in letter. So from NYCHA, this is what a conditional move-in letter looks like. This has a basic voucher information. So it has information about the people in your household, what's the new address, who's the new owner, and what's the rent breakdown, like what's the monthly contract rent, what's being covered by the tenant, what's being covered by NYCHA. And then this has a date of conditional move-in. And this is not like your final move-in date, but it is a conditional move letter. So it's like you're probably going to be able to move by then. And then with HPD, they have basically the same information in a slightly different looking letter. Notice of conditional approval to move with rental assistance has all that same information in a different format. The important part of this conditional move-in letter is that you can use this if you need to apply for moving assistance. So Amy can use this conditional move-in letter to apply for HRA moving assistance. There are a lot of costs of moving. We know this, it's an expensive thing. I mean, as with everything in New York, it costs. So there's like, if you use a moving service and like have to get boxes and supplies, that costs money. A broker's fee if you used a broker, your security deposit, first month's rent, all of these are, very real costs that are in addition to normal costs of rent. Ideally, Amy has saved up money for these costs and or she has support from friends, family, community, who could maybe, help her with the move. Someone has a truck or a car to be able to help move things. Or, Amy has saved up an emergency fund and can cover these costs in an ideal world. So this is something that we're striving towards. We're striving to have that level of independence, self-sufficiency, and that level of financial independence to be able to cover these costs. But we also know that we don't live in an ideal world all the time. And if Amy needs additional support, she can apply for financial assistance from HRA and or some other community organizations that might be able to help out with this. So first, looking at this, a great question in the chat, EHV incentives to move. So this is an important, very important question. So when you first move into an apartment with your emergency housing voucher, and that's like, you were just issued the voucher and you use it for the first time, there are lots of incentives. This was because they're getting the program started. They really wanted landlords to accept them and they wanted people to be able to use their vouchers immediately as well as they could. And so there were incentives with that. With that, it was guaranteed that you would get your first month's rent covered. You would get a security voucher. You would get a broker's fee that is 15% of the annual rent. And landlords would also get an extra month of rent. So those were really great incentives. Those, unfortunately, are only for the first initial move-in. That was to initially use your voucher. Any further moves that you have with your voucher, beyond that initial use, you do not have these incentives guaranteed. So there are some ways that you can apply and try and get more financial assistance, but it's not guaranteed at all. The only time that those are guaranteed are the first use of your emergency housing voucher. So I know that a lot of clients, because we had it the first time, you think that that's something that is automatic, but unfortunately it's not. So that is something that we have to figure out when clients are trying to move for out of that initial apartment. So looking at HRA moving assistance, what is it? This is an emergency grant, aka a one-shot deal. This is a part of a cash assistance case. And so you can have like an active ongoing cash assistance case that this is like added onto it, or it can be a single issuance, which is like you have a cash assistance case, but like only just for this one thing. It's not an ongoing active case. It's just this one thing. It's not guaranteed. As we said, you are guaranteed with incentives for the first placement with your emergency housing voucher. It's not guaranteed for any further placements after that. You may be required to pay back some or all of the grant. It kind of depends. Eligibility criteria for one-shot deals is not advertised. It's all evaluated by a case-by-case basis. Generally, there must be like a reason that has prevented you from paying this like expense, and you have to show that you like will have a level of financial independence moving forward. HRA doesn't want to give financial grants if this is something that's ongoing. They want it to be like, okay, like why is this? That's why it's called a one-shot deal. Why is this like really a one-off cost? You won't have to pay it in the future, and they might require you to pay back some or all of the grant like over time in the future. The goal is to help, low-income New York City residents with a one-time urgent cost, such as like, I have an emergency move. I haven't really gotten much assistance from HRA before, but like, I really got to get out of my apartment. It's unsafe for me to be here, and I don't have the means to be able to do this on my own. So how to apply? So first, you can apply either through Access HRA or at an Access HRA Benefits Access Center. Those used to be called job centers, but now they're called Benefits Access Centers. So you can apply in person or through Access HRA. Access HRA is online, and it's also an app on your phone. I would not recommend doing the whole application through the app on your phone. It's pretty long. And so those are the two different ways you can do it. If you have an active cash assistance case, you can go to your active case in Access HRA and then click Request Case Change or Grant. And then you can request to add an emergency grant to your current case. If you don't have an active cash assistance case, you're going to have to open a cash assistance case. So you're going to create an application for an emergency grant to open the single issuance case. In order to have a cash assistance case, you have to show all these things to show your household information, to show your income, to show your immigration status, to show that you're eligible. So you're going to have to show all of that documentation. You also have to do an interview. Usually they do phone interviews. And so this is something you have to do with HRA if you don't already have an active case. Once you submit the application, these are the costs that I need covered. This is all of my information. Then you're gonna need to upload supporting documentation. So you're gonna upload, if you have your new lease, all of your information about your new address. This is where you upload your conditional move-in letter, a HAB contract. You upload the proof of income and identity and like resources for anyone in your household. A breakdown of what's needed to move, things like that. And so you upload all the supporting documentation, you do the application, and it usually takes them 30 to 45 days to receive a decision after all the documents are submitted. It's a bit of a pain. It's a long process. So this is something that like as soon as you get that conditional move-in letter, if you're going to need help, you're going to want to start this process immediately. You're going to want to open your case as quickly as you can. If you have questions, if you need help with this, I would recommend to go in person to an HRA center. It takes a really long time if you're calling on the phone. You might get a call back, but it's a tricky process. So to get this started as soon as you can, to get that help, is what I would recommend. Documents, information you may need. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these. It's basically like you're going to need to upload a lot of information. So you want to prep this in advance if you're going to be needing to apply for emergency assistance. Well, hello, Joyce Cat. And then if maybe you get denied from HRA or they don't help meet all of your needs, you still need other types of moving assistance. As we said earlier, we're working towards that level of you have that emergency fund, you have those levels of social or family supports, community members, family, friends who can help you. with the difficulties of the moving process. There are also other community organizations, some ones that have occasionally, been able to help with rental expenses, our Catholic Charities and Salvation Army. There's also like domestic violence organizations that have flexible funding. So if you're receiving services, that is something you can ask about as well. But overall, we wish there was, more easy funding and that it was guaranteed past that first move. But it's kind of tricky to do this. So figuring out the questions of how to finance the move at the beginning is kind of something that you're going to have to be able to plan for. The second part of this big complex step is the HAP contract. HAP, as we said, was housing assistance payments. And this is something that is issued to the landlord after the unit passes inspection. And so the HAP contract basically has all of the details of the apartment rental. The cost, the lease term, the household information, the payment information, a breakdown of the utilities, like what are the utilities? Is it included in rent? Is it paid for by owner, by tenant? Is it, is the heating and cooking, is that gas or oil, electric? So it really has all of the information broken down. And this, you can see here on the right, it has places for both the landlord and for the housing agency, which is HPD or NYCHA, to sign. So the HAP contract is an agreement between the landlord and the public housing agency. And to be able to kind of like picture these documents and like what are the relationships kind of happening here, because we know that there are a lot of players here, we're going to look at the HAP contract as a part of like the bigger picture. So in the EHV program, which is like basically used as Section 8, there are three main players here. You have the public housing agency, and as in New York City, we have EHVs administered by NYCHA and HPD. And there's also the tenant, that's you, the voucher holder. And then there's also the landlord or prospective landlord. So there's three main players that are, we have to deal with in this picture. We have the voucher is between the public housing agency and the tenant. So when you want to move, the public housing agency gives you, the tenant, the voucher. This is between you and the public housing agency. Next, we have the lease. The lease is a legal contract between the tenant and the landlord. Finally, we have the HAP contract, which is a legal contract between the public housing agency and the landlord. So this is kind of what makes the EHV world go round, the Section 8 world go round. These are the players in the triangle. If it's something with your lease, that's between you and your landlord. If it's an issue with the HAP contract, that's between the landlord and the agency. If it's something about your voucher, that's between you and the public housing agency. So I hope that is able to clarify a little bit of the documentation and what are the different roles of the different players here. So once you have that HAP contract, that's basically, you fill it all out, the landlord and the public housing agency are going to sign it. Great. The public housing agency is going to review it all. And once, also I forgot to mention, sorry, once they're signing the HAP contract, the landlord and the public housing agency, you as the tenant and your landlord are signing your lease at that time as well, that has all the same terms as the HAP contract. So that is when the lease is signed and executed, the HAP contract is signed and executed. And then all of that is sent back to the public housing agency for one big final review. They have all the documents, they have the lease, they have the HAP contract, and they're like, just making sure. Let's look, everything is good, nothing's changed. Then you're gonna get an approval letter. And finally, that's when you can move. So this is what a NYCHA HAP approval letter looks like. It basically, we're happy to inform you that your HAP contract has been executed and you're ready to go. This is what the rent breakdown is. This is when subsidy payments begin. You can move. For HPD, this looks like they send you a new rent breakdown letter. So whenever there are changes in your case, they'll usually send you rent breakdown letters. So this is not like a one-time thing that you ever get an HPD rent breakdown letter, but you get one specifically to allow you to move in this case, and that has kind of the same information. This is what the payment is. This is when it's beginning. Here you are. And then Amy moves in to her new apartment.
Thanks, Katie. That was a lot. Thank you. So we put this checklist together. Oh my God, why am I stuck with all the checklists? So here's another checklist, but this one is more to do and easier for Amy. Remember to call Con Edison or National Grid to set up utilities under your name and make sure your old utility accounts are closed. I think this is really, really, really important. And of course, update your address with the post office to forward your mail to the new address, sorry, and update your address with the Social Security Administration, your bank, your employer, your kids' schools, right? Any medical providers, especially like with HRA, like if you have Medicaid, like all of it. And then voter registration will also happen with your DMV. And your ID, it's like a whole process, right? And with your ID, sometimes you could do that online too. It's easy, you don't have to go in. But for driver's license, I think you have to go in. And then just spend some time exploring different places, right? New places in your new neighborhood, resources, schools, libraries, parks, grocery stores, daycare centers, medical providers, transportation, of course, where the police offices, the precinct, right? Anything that you feel will be a resource. Yeah, and I'm sure you guys have done this before, but just this is what you need to know and just remind you again when you transfer, when you move again.
Awesome. Thank you, Joy. And again, we know that this is a lot of information, but the goal is to, kind of have a lot of this information in one place. And you can come back and revisit it as much as you need. This is recorded. We will have the slides. And there are a lot of resources there for you. And so we want to be able to connect to your community organizations, build those networks, build those resources. And whenever you're moving, you want to get to know your new community, get to know the people around you, get to know the local community resources around you. And that is something that is really critical, especially, if you've had an emergency transfer, you're coming out of a shelter, something like that, to be able to build that healthy network of supports is really important to be able to help establish your healthy new life. So, next, questions about your EHV. There are still going to be questions. Of course, we cannot answer everything, and there are also going to be a lot of specific questions that you guys may have about your own process, your own voucher, things like that. So you'll want to contact the public housing agency that administers your voucher. So for NYCHA, they have this phone line, that's the customer contact center. I won't lie, I was on the phone with them for 3 hours earlier, and then they just disconnected me at the end of the 3 hours without even letting me talk to someone. So that is something that you should maybe, beware. You can call, but it's going to be a whole day commitment. And you might want to try it in the morning. I would recommend, if you're trying to, get in contact with NYCHA, to go to a walk-in center. So they have 2 of those, and you can make an appointment online ahead of time to talk with a real person about your questions. HPD, you don't need an appointment to go to their office in person. It's at 100 Gold Street. It's open on weekdays from 9 to 4. They're pretty helpful, pretty quick. So I would definitely recommend that. It's honestly not something that a lot of people know about because it was closed during the pandemic and now it's just reopened. So that you can call HPD's phone line to talk to someone. There's like buttons to click that's like, I have a voucher, and then you can click to speak with a case manager to talk about your case. You can go in person if you think that's more helpful. And then there are also HPD emails for all the different topics. And so there's an email list that is hyperlinked there. For other questions related to your EHV or even not, any other general case management question, things like that, I want everyone to know about the family justice centers. So there is a family justice center, an FJC, in each borough. And these are like publicly known locations. The you can find the addresses on the website. You can just Google them. And these are places where a lot of the community-based organizations are co-located with a district attorney's office. And they have a lot of resources. And these are all for survivors of gender-based violence. And this includes, you know, if you need drop-in case management, you can become a client at your FJC in your borough, get to work with a case manager there. They have, you know, counseling or a legal consult, things like that. So I would highly recommend if, you know, you need case management and, you know, you're not able to get like a more, if you're not working with already a case manager or advocate, go to your FJC for some support with that. And they are a great resource, one in each borough, become a client. Everything there is totally free as well. Now, Q&A. Again, I know we threw a lot of questions at you, or a lot of information at you, and I really appreciate all of your engagement in the chat throughout this presentation. I hope we were able to answer a lot of the questions, but if not, feel free to put any in the chat now, and you can also answer them at a later time. So great question in the chat. The checks the city issues to landlords. The city, by that, do you mean HRA? The Human Resources Administration? Like as part of like a cash assistance case, like your rental allowance? If you can answer my question in the chat, because I'm not, more like NYCHA. So like, oh, like NYCHA's land checks that are going to the landlord, your voucher subsidy that's going to the landlord. For that, you should go to NYCHA. So you're gonna want, you can get from your landlord, like, what is all the information, like, what are the payments that they've received? What is the address that everything that should be going to? And you can bring that all to NYCHA to make sure that, are the payments being received? Are they being sent to the right address? If not, if there were like any issues, they can cancel old payments, issue new ones. This has been something that happens sometimes if they get sent to the wrong place or if there's been an error. The landlords also can contact NYCHA themselves. And so landlords have this, like tenants have a NYCHA self-service portal. Landlords have an owner extranet, which is their own owner portal with NYCHA. And so if there are any issues with that, the landlords themselves can contact NYCHA about issues with payments. And sometimes that is a little bit of an easier way to, you know, you don't have to play middleman between all of these agencies and wait in line and do all of those things if it really is like just a payment issue. Like we kind of had that triangle earlier. If it's a payment issue, that's an issue of the house. And that is between the landlord and NYCHA. And so if you can have your landlord check their owner portal and them talk with NYCHA, if not, you can go to NYCHA for that. FJCs can help with more general questions, but probably not to like do this very specific thing that is probably like a NYCHA error. Alicia, I see I can allow you to talk there.
Thank you. I also noticed the tenant portal look slightly different on your end than what I see. So I don't know if that's maybe like, do I need to use a specific browser maybe to view it like that?
No, honestly, well, one thing, I had to like super zoom out on mine in order to be able to get a screenshot that had everything in there. So it looks a little bit different from when you're like accessing normally, 'cause otherwise you're gonna have to like scroll through the information. So that might be a little bit different. I'm on Chrome. I don't know if that changes it. I haven't really actually, no, it doesn't really change because I've logged in from Firefox also, and that's basically the same. So it shouldn't really change that much. It should have basically the same information. If you don't want to compare, like have me take a look, you can send a picture via email. But I think that should be pretty similar. It's just that kind of the way that I had to manipulate the portal to be able to take pictures did mess up the way it looks a little bit.
Okay. I probably will email you the picture to see. Thank you.
Try Chrome. Highly recommend.
Yeah.
And then we have a really good question. Can landlords take another tenant after accepting voucher packet if the whole process takes too long?
Great question. I have not heard of this happening. I guess I don't know exactly the legal things that the HAP contract is the like really binding thing between the landlord and the agency, and so they can't break the HAP contract. Before then, potentially, I don't really know exactly like the legal specifics of all of that. Be kind of rude if they did, but I mean, landlords being rude is not the most surprising thing in the whole entire world. But it is good to kind of know going into this process that it is going to take a little while. And so being able to kind of prepare landlords for that is something that, you know, as a case manager, I try to do. Be like, it's not, they're not moving in a few weeks. You know, it's not happening that quickly. But the HAP contract is that like legal contract between the landlord and the public housing agency.
Yeah, I think it just depends on the situation. Like I think a lot of times if the landlord is in really good communication with the broker, you know, the broker can kind of communicate and like let them know and just like answer a lot of the questions. Or if you have a social worker or a caseworker, like for example, I was emailing with, this was an emergency transfer, and I was emailing with the new landlord quite a bit, you know, and just kind of being like, okay, you know, this like the reinspection date is, you know, like trying to get them a reinspection date and stuff like that. So but Sparkle's saying that, yeah, that it could happen, but it makes sense. If like if they haven't signed anything and it's all waiting too long, right? And then I think Jack Jack answered it. With NYSHA portals, the best browser to use is Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge for optimized usage of the portal. And I have a feeling that that's Raul. Jack, are you Raul?
Real sneaky there.
I know, sneaky Jack, Raul-ish. So cute. Any other questions? And again, well, Sparkle, did you want to be unmuted? I see your hands raised.
Let me allow you to talk.
Go ahead, Sparkle.
Yes, that happened to me recently. I went to go see a unit, and the broker and the landlord was like, "Oh, they taking too long with the paperwork because I had to wait for a new a new Section 8 cover for the new voucher and everything." They was like, "Oh, it's taking too long. Mine just only been like 2 or 3 days." They said they're gonna give me the apartment and everything. I gave them everything they needed. They contacted my worker. He gave them all the information. On the third day, I found out that they gave the apartment to the contractor.
Mm.
So a lot of these landlords and a lot of these brokers be saying that, oh, it take too long. They want us to come and they want us to sign the papers. They want us to view the apartments and everything. And then they just have us sitting around waiting and not saying anything just to give the apartment to somebody else.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that happened. Yeah.
It's not a pretty.
Yeah. And that could happen on the private side too. A lot. Yeah, that could also happen on non-voucher holder side too, right? Like if you don't get your deposit in on time, or I think it's really, really tough.
Something to try and do with that, like even though it does take a while, or emphasizing some of the landlords might want to hear the benefits of voucher holders. Like once you get it set up, like it's really regular. Like you're gonna get their payment from NYCHA or HPD. Like that's pretty guaranteed. And so sometimes like
I don't think they care about that. I think once they see somebody come with money up in their hand, they just like they don't care about who has a voucher or anything.
That's true. And that's on the state of our, real estate is not, it's not great at the moment. So as we kind of talked about last week, the apartment search takes a ton of time, a ton of energy, emotional energy, things like that. So it's a really big commitment, and going into it, it's important to know this, know all of this. You can't, you can come and be like, oh, I'm gonna be in a new place next month. It's really hard and it takes a lot of work, but it is possible. There are resources there. And a great question in the chat right now, what if the voucher expires and you haven't secured an apartment? So at that point, you reach back out to your agency, your public housing agency, Nitro HPD, and you can get a voucher extension if it's necessary. Give us 1 or 2 more minutes for questions. But again, after all of this, I would expect probably, early next week, as soon as I can, we'll get out an email to everyone who's registered for all of these to be able to give you all the recordings, the resources, handouts, our information. So feel free to follow up on all of that. There's no new questions in the chat. Here we have a little bit more information about sanctuary and university settlement. And there's also the New York City Domestic Violence Hotline that can connect you to even more community-based organizations around the city, different shelters, things like that may be necessary. And we want to thank you all so much.
Thank you guys so much. Yeah, and based on your participation and based on your questions, I think we'll definitely provide more follow-up kind of webinars and even like workshops, I think, so that we can workshop some of the questions and issues that you guys had. So I really appreciate your honesty, your attendance, your participation and everything. Yeah, you guys are awesome. Have a great rest of the evening. We wish you all well.
Take care of yourselves, stay safe, stay dry out there, and yeah, reach out with any questions, but thank you so much for attending.
Bye, you guys. Have a good night. Thanks, Raul. Shout out.
Star, we'll get the slides. I'll send out the slides along with the recording at the probably beginning of next week.
Do you guys have any other questions?